Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Oliver Till. We are very happy to have Pier Paolo Tamburelli from BAUKUH here tonight. He will give a lecture on the subject of the lecture series. And just before we start with the lecture, I would just quickly say a few words about our speaker of tonight. Pier Paolo was born in 1976. He studied in Genoa, and after graduation, he did a post-graduation program at the BAUKUH Institute in Rotterdam. And that was in the beginning of the zeros. And in 2004, he founded, together with 5 other basically friends from his study, an office in Genoa called BAUKUH. And the office has now 2 branches, one in Genoa and one in Milano. And the reason why the office was founded was because of the fact that the BAUKUH won 2 competitions for young architects at the same time. That was the European competition. And because of that, he set up his own business. And I think the office exists now almost 20 years and could realize several projects. So they started with a housing project or basically 2 housing projects in Albania. They built a little cultural center for a beer brewer somewhere in the Italian countryside. And I think that probably the most known work of the office is the House of Memory in Milano, which has been realized close to the Bosco Verticale from how's the guy called? Bosco Boeri, Stefano Boeri, exactly. And at the moment, the office works on the new library building in Milano, together with on-site studio also from Milan. But Pier Paolo is not only working as an architect, but also as a teacher. So he has been teaching on several institutes. We tried to make a list, but it was not clear if all the places are included. So he started in Aleppo. He has been teaching for a very long time at the Politecnico in Milan. He taught at TU Munich, at the BAUKUH Institute in Rotterdam and Delft, in Chicago, in Harvard, and also he did the summer school in Porto. And he's now a professor at the TU Wien since, I think, 2 years. But that's not all, because Pier Paolo has also been one of the co-founders of the San Rocco magazine. Let's say, I think, important voice of the young architects generation in the, let's say, of the last 10, 15 years. And he wrote also 2 books. I have them both here. I think I still have them. Yeah. I have to keep this. That is that one. Let's say he worked for, I think, almost more than 10 years on that book. It's a book on Bramante. It's not a PhD. It's interesting. Yeah? He just did it by himself. And it's a fantastic book about, let's say, the Italian master Bramante. And yeah, it gives a lot of insight in on one hand in the thinking of the Italian Renaissance, but also a lot of insight in the fact what the praxis of Italian Renaissance architecture has to do with our profession nowadays. And he did a second book. I just received it in the afternoon. We had not really time to study it. That book is called Grundkurs. And that is basically a book for first and second year students to get understanding of what architecture is and architecture can do. So, and now I give the floor to you. Thank you very much, Pier Paolo.
Good evening. Thanks, Oliver, for inviting me in this series. I will try to speak about what you asked me. So, architecture in the age of neoliberalism and monument. I think I wrote about monument explicitly only once. This text that appeared in Sirocco, that is probably the most explicitly pop thing I ever wrote, which is a piece about this thing. Maybe some of you might know it. It's the Stanley Cup. The Stanley Cup is the cup that the team that wins the NHL, the National Hockey League, wins. So the league that brings together United States and Canada. And I have absolutely no interest for hockey. I don't even know the rules. But the thing is that this cup has always seemed to me quite interesting. And the story of this cup is that it started as this. Is there one of those red light? No. Okay. So it's this little bowl there. That's the Stanley Cup. I think Stanley is the name of the governor of Canada who bought it. And then slowly the cup started to grow because they would put some disc below it with the name of the players. So the cup started to grow towards the so this is the thing, and then it grows like this. Somehow a little bit like this Piranesian, and this engraving by Piranesi with the foundation of, I don't remember what. But thing is very similar, and the cup that was probably designed by an employee of the National Hockey League. There's this drawing in the Hockey Hall of Fame, unsigned, somehow shows how the monument grows, so to speak, through the repetition of the same gesture. I think this is interesting in architectural terms, because it is exactly the fact that here you write all of the formation of the, I don't know, Edmonton Oilers of 1978, and then here there's the, I don't know, Montreal, whatever, of 77, and here the Boston Bruins of 75. And these repetition of the fact that every year you do a new edition, and this is accumulated into the object somehow, produces actually this impression of monumentality, which is actually much more convincing in the case of the Stanley Cup than in the case of all the other sport trophies that I happen to know. Exactly because I think here there's this mechanism of ritual mechanism of repetition that is so clearly exposed. Now, I don't think that we do monuments in this sense anymore in contemporary architecture. This has been a paradigm that I think has been fundamental for the creation of the discipline. And there's very clear, in my opinion, link in between Roman architecture and certain features of Roman religion and certain features of Roman religion to Roman architecture and the kind of architecture we are still doing nowadays. But I don't really think that society, at least in Western Europe in 2023, is asking us to do this, which is also a problem because we have a practice that in a way presupposes that it has cultural value because of certain reasons. For instance, the duration in time still plays a role, while it refers to a society that doesn't exactly demand for these. What we are actually doing, which on the contrary, I think is still somehow confronting us with the idea of the monument, is that architecture uses a lot of money. So architecture is a form of art. First of all, architecture, this is a bit of a side notation, but I think it will become evident after why I think it's important. Architecture in our society is still the only form of commissioned art. So you make a project as an architect, need to find a client. The client need to give you the money. It gives, not you, but it gives the money to construction site, the bureaucracy, blah, blah, blah. So the money is put into the process before the thing is built. So you need to trust your artist, in this case, the architect, before he or she produces something. This doesn't happen it used to happen in painting as well. It used to happen in sculpture, but it doesn't happen anymore. This is a shift that took place in the second half of the 19th century. And nowadays, the contemporary art market functions in a completely different way. So the artist, or maybe with some money from the gallery, but rarely, the artist produces something that then is sold on the free market. Architecture doesn't work like that. And architecture is somehow related with gigantic process of transformation, which by size alone, this is just the IKEA storage next to Piacenza in northern Italy, thinks that by size alone, without any ambition, have a certain public relevance, because they simply occupy so much space that you cannot avoid noticing them. This also means that the architect is part of this process, that are process of reorganization of the material environment in which we live, and which have a social public meaning, sometimes just because of their sheer size. Architecture is fundamentally in my opinion, is the type of public art that it is, exactly because it's based on that. It's based on a gigantic collective effort in which a certain society puts money, knowledge, and workforce in order to produce something. This something is then formalized according to the idea of a specific subject, of a specific artist, that is the architect. The architect doesn't decide what is to be built. He or she decides how this thing has to be built. So there is immediately a difference in between the building as the object that is produced and the building as an image of what it has to be produced. There's a fantastic definition of architecture by Giorgio Grassi, who's an Italian architect, nowadays 85 years old, something like that, author of this drawing here, in which Grassi says that the building is at the same time, in Italian is oggetto e rappresentazione della regola che lo governa, which means it is the object and the representation of the rule that governs itself. So the rule that defines the object is not only controlling the object, it's also represented in the object. So the object is somehow shifted in between the object itself and its own representation as an example of the application of the rule. In this little non-correspondence of the object and of the representation of the object takes place the intellectual freedom and the intellectual creation of the architect, which is very limited if you follow this approach. So a similar, a rather similar definition of what is the subject of the artistic intervention of the architect is given by João Batista Villanova Artigas, who's a Brazilian architect who died, I believe, in the early 90s, and who says that the architecture is always the representation of a collective effort of a civilization that gives itself certain scopes. So architecture is public art, and this, I think, is something we might question probably in 2023, but so far it has been relevant as a cultural activity as public art. And this public art is exercised on goals that are decided by a collectivity, that are economically relevant. So people pay taxes in order to produce building, or maybe private clients put their own money into this thing, and at a certain moment they leave a lot of decision about this thing to a certain professional, that is the architect. In this sense, architecture is monumental irrespective of scale, because it's monumental as a model of how to use and organize resources inside of a society. So architecture is always, in a way, proposing a model. The way in which I put together the door handle and the door in the garage of my grandmother is exactly the same way I would reorganize, recollectivize the entire wealth of the totality of Germany, if ever they would ask me. Okay, so there is a methodological ambition that is always present in good architecture. Good architecture is always scarily, ambitious and yeah, a little bit. There's this very beautiful definition that James Sterling gives of Piranesi as a megalomaniac, whatever. The acronym is MAF, megalomaniacal failed architect, or something like that. saying that every architecture attempt is always possibly extendable, if that's an English word, so that could possibly extended to be applied to a much wider set of problems. This is why architecture is monumental in more general terms, even when it doesn't immediately correspond to, I don't know, a tomb or a monument, so to speak. So the way in which these two things, so the corner salute, this little Ionic volute at the corner of Santa Maria the cloister of Santa Maria della Pace in Rome by Bramante, or this detail of the Florey building in Oxford by James Stirling, are monumental because they fundamentally show a way in which you could actually destroy the world and rebuild it slightly better, maybe. This doesn't work. So these are other images. This is again Bramante in Milan and Stirling in Leicester. This means that if we accept this definition of monument in architecture as something that is irrespective of its own size, a reflection on how to organize the given forces of society in order to produce a certain form that is readable, recognizable, and evident and present in the everyday landscape, then I think we can address the very banal reality of the professional life and understand how these crazy monumental ambition of the discipline can be combined with the very, very modest opportunities that are given, well, to all of us, but in this case, to us, to our office, who's not particularly famous one. So here you see a couple of pictures of this little pavilion for brewery, and a building in Tirana, exhibition design in London, and this attitude of imagining form in every single circumstance and always starting from the specificity of the context applies in our case, at very different scales, as you saw, and as you can see here. This is a project for these pendulum. This is a pendulum of Foucault, so a machine, like a scientific device that demonstrates something about the rotation of the, but I don't know what. But nevertheless, if the pendulum doesn't oscillate freely, so if kids touch this ball, whatever it demonstrates, it doesn't demonstrate anymore. So you need a buffer to keep the kids far from the pendulum. And this thing is like a pan that's 6 meters in diameter, more or less. It's at Palazzo della Ragione in Padua. And of course, this is a relatively small object, and more or less the logic of this is not different by this logic of this project of very, very large scale, which is not really a project. It's more like a description, which, by the way, we did in collaboration with Atelier KEMPETHILL, the office run by Professor Oliver Till. And this attitude towards form, so as something that can help understanding a certain context and can help creating configurations that are readable into that context, goes across the very different cases. And here I have a little bit of even very old projects to show what does it mean in the concrete reality of certain proposal. Like this is a proposal for the expansion of Asplund Library. This is a very old thing that's probably 15 years old, this thing. So a competition for this library. Yeah. Or this competition for a for theater in Varese, which is a mid-sized city in between Milan and Switzerland, in which the new theater, which is this triangular thing that was actually, we were asked to put the theater here, but in reality, by moving the theater to this very complicated triangular site, we could generate not only these large square, but also this minor square, repeating once again the case of piazza più piazzetta, which is so typical of Italian cities. And this is a competition we lost. We were, I don't know, third, something like that. And you see how in a way, the monumental form is, first of all, submitted to a bigger urban logic, and the form is just used to make this larger urban logic readable into the city. These are a couple of views of square and the theater. And this is a model of the theater at the Graham Foundation in Chicago. Well, this we can skip. This is another version of the same attitude. So these are computer screens controlling the experiments at the CERN in Geneva. And this is the view of the Alps from the Salève, which is a mountain next to Geneva. This is part of a study on the metropolitan area of Geneva that was that was promoted by the Fondation Braillard, and that was called Grand Genève, and it discussed the possibility of the development of Geneva in the next 50 years. That was before COVID, imagining very significant growth of the area. We did this study together with Stefano Boeri and Michel de Vigne and others. And we concentrated on the hidden presence of the CERN, the current particle colliders, which is a 8-kilometer long underground circle, like underground tunnel, which the particles are basically accelerated in order to, even in this case, demonstrate something that I don't understand. And the CERN this is the existing synchrotron, and the CERN has a project for a new one, 100-kilometer tunnel, which would go also under the lake. This thing will cost an amount of money that I don't even remember, but it's a serious scenario. And what we say is that in case this thing will be built, it could be intelligent not to do what happened when the CERN was built, so that it's completely invisible and unused by the city. Although, for instance, this thing consumes as much energy as all of the rest of Geneva. And of course, it's atomic energy bought from France. And what we said was, what if we would imagine that this thing that in the end is a tunnel, it's an underground tunnel, could not produce, but actually bring around energy so that it could be connected at certain specific point with the surface and provide a certain set of services to certain nodes, and so guide the growth of these Grand Genève. You have also to consider that Switzerland arrives here, more or less, and the rest is all in France. This is Annecy, this is already Lake Annecy. And somehow this circle, probably unintentionally, because the circle has been designed more or less by the scientists at CERN, this figure was very interesting because it highlighted exactly at the center the Salève. So it somehow suggested the existence of a potential city with these mountains, so this park in the middle. And this became for us a way to read all of this territory and to imagine its possible growth. Again, this circle, so the formalism of our proposal, so this is a drawing, 360-degree panorama from the center of the Salève, so from the center of the mountain. This is actually the underground path of the new synchrotron. This is the old synchrotron, the airport, city of Geneva, with the cathedral, the jet d'eau, the Alps, all of the rest of the lake, Le Mans, the funiculaire connecting to this. This is the Salève. And here then it's more and more France. This is the Mont Blanc, I think. So the circular figure was somehow completely disappeared, wasn't to be visible anywhere except in some diagrams, but somehow suggested the possibility to read the territory and to imagine its potential growth. So this idea of form is always used also in a very pragmatic fashion. Another case is another beautiful, although non-successful initiative that I conducted with Atelier KEMPETHILL and Professor Till. That is a competition for an area, very large rail yard in Milan called Scalo Farini. This is the Cathedral of Milan, this is the castle, this is the station, and here there is the so-called monumental cemetery. Monumental cemetery is this thing, at the moment is 150 years old, so it's full of monumental trees, so it's actually a park, a very already existing, very large park in the middle of the city. So when we were asked to design a park in this area, we thought, why don't we just conclude the geometry of the cemetery, which is very clearly broken by the existing railway. So the railway goes like this, and recompose these this two half of the city into a single large-scale form, which then would regulate also all the urban development that is connected to that. Here is a bit, again, a drawing of the scenario for Grand Genève, and this is at another scale a similar thing. This is a project for a university campus in Albania, which is actually a restoration at urban scale, because this is the existing student city built in communist period. This is the plan of the proposal I showed before for Milan, where you see how the railway cuts the shape of the cemetery. We discovered, for instance, that it was possible to walk on top of the border of the existing cemetery, so that there was a path, like quite wide, like 5-6 meter wide, on top of this wall. So there was already existing sort of connection that could lead to the other part of the city. Here is very heavily connected. Here is really city center of Milano, and here looks like at the moment completely different type of ward, but actually it's super close. And again, the attitude is very similar, and to a certain extent, I think, I mean, if we use the word with a little bit of caution, I would say that through all these different projects, it's very clear that we are very, very formalist office, that we always try to find a form for those different circumstances. But this doesn't mean that this form is kind of thrown from, let's say, from the moon onto these places. It's always very carefully discovered into the reality, as if it would be already there. Then there are other circumstances in which actually there's nothing there, and then you start from scratch. This is a competition proposal for the new city hall of Tirana, done in collaboration with Johnson Mark Lee and Yellow Office, in which in this new prolongation of the main axis of Tirana, in a part of the city that is completely without, completely new, it's at the moment a brownfield, we try to build this very large urban pergola, which would be provide the city with a covered public space that could be used in summer, particularly because in the city center of Tirana, there's this beautiful square by Belgian office 51 and 4E, which is this very, very low pyramid, which is very difficult to use in summer because it's completely without shadow. And we thought that the two space, which would not be very different, could be complementary. I think I can skip this. This is again very similar attitude at a much smaller scale. This is a competition for a restoration of a school which used to be a Catholic seminar in a place called Hoogstraten near Antwerp in Belgium. And you see again here all these buildings from different eras, not even particularly beautiful, that are brought together by this little portico that somehow reconstructs a border for this space that at the moment is used as backyard, but actually could be used as a shared public space for the entire complex. At the very beginning of our activity, we did a couple of projects that were maybe a bit more bold in trying to be really monumental. So I show them here. They're a bit more naive. This is a project for a church in Norway, in a place that honestly don't even remember how it's called. We didn't win the competition. We did this model that we then dropped into the snow because by chance it was snowing a lot, even in the mountains next to Genoa where it's not so common. And we did this, whatever it might be. And another competition we did at the time, which are both very close to the beginning of our activity as an office, was this thing for the Expo 2010 in Shanghai, and this was for the Italian pavilion. And the idea of this pavilion was to create a sort of very defined space, very simple, where you could park whatever you want to exhibit, I don't know, Ferraris, and to have a gigantic roof that could be excavated and be somehow populated by these spaces, somehow referring to a Roman Renaissance tradition, and generate these kind of floating spectacle of space, a little bit like a ruin of which you don't have the foundation, which is normally the thing you have in ruins for obvious reasons, but you actually add the vault. And this was also supposed to be built in felt, so as to produce kind of astonishing silence in the context of this world exhibition, which is a very noisy context. And these are a few pictures of the making of this very big model we did for this thing. We had much more energy at the time. And this is kind of the model, and there's also a video you can find on YouTube. After that, we had the opportunity to actually build a real monument, although small. This thing, this is a model again of a thing called the House of Memory, which is a building for a series of associations that are linked to the most tragic episodes of the recent history of Milan. And this building is an extremely simple thing. It's a box. And on the exterior of the box, a little bit like in a polyptych from the Middle Age or the Renaissance, are represented some important seeds in the history of the city, like, for instance, I know this is a previous version, but okay, but here in the final version, there is a picture of the explosion at the Bank of Agriculture, which is the first terrorist attack of the season of terrorism in Italy of 12 December 1969. So these are these scenes, and then there are figures like portraits below. This thing was pretty much inspired, but what I consider probably the most sophisticated reflection on collective memory in contemporary context. That is the series of painting by Gerhard Richter, dedicated to the story of the Baader-Meinhof band, so the terrorists of the Rote Armee Fraktion. This is the series, and you see that, as in, for instance, this Polyptych by Piero da Francesca, where you have a main component and smaller, like parallel thing, you have this very big collective scene. So this is the, I think it's titled something like Festnahme. So it's the moment in which the terrorists are captured, and this is the funeral. I guess this is titled Beerdigung. And then together with that, there's much smaller type of paintings that are portraits, like these portraits of Gudrun Esseling, I think. But also portrait of Ulrike Meinhof. This is a portrait of Ulrike Meinhof much before her activity, her involvement in RAF. This combination of a smaller, more intimate dimension of memory and a larger, explicitly public dimension was important for us. The other thing that was important for us was that, as in the Richter painting, by reproducing with different color of bricks the picture, you have an effect that somehow from afar the picture looks more defined, but when you come closer, you try to see what it actually is, the image somehow disappears. So somehow the building is, yes, a monument to very precise episodes in history, but the moment in which you really want to know what it is about, the monument also, so to speak, refuses to be a monument. Of course, there are precedents we looked at, like this very beautiful library by one of Gorman, but also this thing that we were seeing in Egypt at the time, the project you saw before has been done more or less in the same moment. This is a picture by Bas Prinsen, and it's a piece of the city along the Nile. Of course, we search for precedents, blah, blah, blah. This is how the thing was done. So it's just a code, and the bricklayers had to put the right bricks. And well, this is a bit, the building then is super simple. Inside is very simply organized as a conference space, archive, some office spaces, and this very big stair that actually brings the viewer close to the collection, although the collection of books and documents is not directly, should not be directly accessible. So this was a way to establish a physical link in between the viewer and the collection, even if the documents were not accessible. These are pictures of the building, of the construction also. These are the association. As you see, they're not really young. A project that was very explicitly monumental, but also in a way very fragile, very temporary, is this project for a pavilion at the Chicago Biennial of 2017. The biennial was titled Make New History was curated by Sharon Johnston and Mark Lee. And we proposed to build a pavilion which looks like a box. And this box was titled Chapel for the Scenes of Public Life, and was an attempt to imagine contemporary architecture capable of addressing public life, but also addressing the need of representing public life. So given that in that case we were both the client, the architect, the artist, whatever, all sort of protagonists of the story, we imagined a cycle of paintings to appear inside of the chapel. And the painting, the cycle is titled, and these are all tests for, these are photos by Stefano Graziani of the Palazzo della Civiltà in Torino by Pierluigi Nervi, which is currently abandoned thing, which was used for Expo 61, so the expo that happened for the 100 years of the United First Kingdom and then Republic of Italy. So it's this super, like, gigantic and extremely beautiful hall in Torino, that we used as this imaginary stage for this imaginary event. There was the meeting of the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba is the one of the stories of the True Cross by Piero da Francesca in Arezzo, and Enrico Mattei. Enrico Mattei is a figure of the Italian post-war reconstruction, commander of Catholic partisan fighters, and then the CEO of the Eni, the major Italian oil corporation, a person who was crucial for the, like a very leftist Catholic, who was crucial for the reconstruction of Italy, and who died in a very suspicious airplane accident in 1963, if I'm not wrong. So these are drawings for these scenes, whatever, blah, 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 many different versions, which then were sent to Chicago, and students of the University of Chicago draw them on a piece of paper in full scale, like 1.5 by 2. So these, so you see this grid. The grid is in order to repaint it. And this is the pavilion. And inside you see a bit of these drawings. So this is the situation. You can see Miss Simona Malvezzi. And the last thing is this library we're now building in Milan. It's a competition that we won in July, and that we are now very quickly designing, because it has to be built by 2026. These are a bit the things we looked at in designing this thing. That we designed with the idea, this library is the so-called European Library of Information and Innovation, whatever it might mean. And it doesn't want to be a traditional library, again, whatever it means. but what we thought was to think of a space that is not so much for the consumption of culture, but it's a place for the production of culture. And a space of production of culture, we thought it was space like a workshop, like a place where things could be produced. This very beautiful book by Italian art historian Roberto Longhi, which is dedicated to painting in Ferrara in the 400 and 500, that's titled Officina Ferrarese. Officina means workshop, but somehow is a better word. I don't know what it would be in German. Officina. Werkstatt, yeah. So we imagine this workshop that actually is very simple, like it's made of 2 equal volumes that are like a glass house and that are somehow, yeah, they somehow end up being a double building like this Santa Maria della Spina in Pisa, but they also are pretty much done like this thing, which is a library by James Sterling in Cambridge, the library of the Faculty of History, but also ended up by being like a glass house, ended up also a bit like some of these American buildings of the 70s. This beautiful thing is by Cesar Pelli. And also in being double is somehow similar to this in the different organization of the 2 naves to these recent project by La Catone Vassal. And I don't think it's really much like this thing that Xhezmi Moron did in Milan recently, but a lot of people, when we won the competition, say, oh, you just copied these. So I thought maybe we did. It's possible. I mean, it's certainly not a problem for me. In Milan, there's also this church that's called Santa Maria, I don't remember, which is like that. And again, some more Cesar Pelli, kind of glass house like Cesar Pelli. This is a shopping mall, civic center in a place called Niagara Falls that I think is close to Niagara Falls, but it's Niagara Falls, the city, not Niagara Falls, the falls, and has been demolished, I think. This is Sterling in Cambridge. This is the amazing Cesar Pelli. And this is the section of Sterling. So this is a bit how this thing is organized. I mean, it's not exactly like this, you will see. But this is a bit how we worked on it. We have this building that has the similar, so 2 buildings that are the same plus an appendix, and one has one structure and the other has a slightly different structure. And in the place in between, there's the vertical circulation. This then goes through many different alternatives, but actually is always the same, blah, blah, blah. And this is now we're actually doing it very quickly and addressing these sort of problems, like trying to have 2 different pattern, like this thing is entirely in glass, and so it's screened by a metal grid, a metal skin around that reduces the amount of radiation. Of course, the reduction of radiation is different on the different side, but we also wanted to somehow highlight difference in scaling between the 2 volumes. So this is the volume with the department, so it's many yeah, you see many levels, and this is the more open so-called forum. And so we want to have two different subdivision, and of course there are not so many subdivisions that are capable of let's say corresponding, so at the point where the building ends. So the two rhythms should correspond here, here, and here. And the other thing we wanted was that there were no trapezoidal elements, only rectangles and triangles. So actually it became like a small equation, so not really complicated math, but still sort of math, to which we dedicated a lot of attention. So these are the sort of things we discuss in the office, if you're interested. So if you are passionate in 6 and 9 and 12 and that, maybe you can apply for the office. If you're not interested into this, we are the wrong office. This is the building, more or less. This is how it is now. So much more detailed. So this is the ground floor. There are these round floor elements, which in certain cases allow to see into the underground deposit. This is the deposit. The deposit is actually it's a series of boxes. I think it's 7 per column, and these boxes can move up, and they are taken by a small robot who moves on this grid and brings the books that are contained in the box to the vertical circulation of the books that you don't see in this section. What happens is that actually these little robots moving on top of these gigantic cube of books containing 2.7 million volumes are moving here and there. So we thought it could be fun to see the robots going around. So there are some of these openings, not that many because they are, I don't know, each one costs 30,000 euros. But so the distribution of the system is super simple. There's 4 cores, and there's a main external circulation with escalators here. And here there's the part with the auditorium and the underground levels, and the part dedicated to the kids. This is a bit the subdivision of the department and of the so-called forum, with this platform connecting the two. This is a terrace on top of the thing. Yeah, well, it's very simple. So you see here the escalator, the platform, and the other part of the vertical circulation with the forum here and the various departments, the underground. This is how it looks. This is how it looks from the auditorium and from the square. This is a bit the interior. This is a close-up. This is the escalators. Okay, that's it.
So thank you very much. Huh? Ja? Ja? Yeah, ich weiß. I never really understood what that is, but you needed to probably to look serious or something like this. Actually, we had already in the afternoon we did already a 2-hour interview, so I asked already a lot of questions, but my job is always to start as the first one with one question. So I was wondering what else I could ask. And let's say I was actually intrigued by the statement of what you mentioned from Giorgio Grassi, that you said, as I understood it right, the architecture is the object of the rules, but also the representation of the rules. And I think that's quite interesting, because it opens basically two directions. On one hand, that the architecture has to follow a certain logic, but also at the same time is expressing this logic and is becoming by that also a sort of model. And for me, the main question was, okay, what are the rules? So are there still rules that can be addressed? How you would, let's say, see that? Because I also asked the question because you, let's say, made this book, where you try to explain to students what architecture is. And I was wondering how you would, let's say, define the rules of the profession.
I think in that definition, Grassi means not only the rule of the discipline, but the rules more in general that you would like to implement. The rules of coexistence. I think it's more ambitious, the thing. And the rule of coexistence, I don't know which one they are. I mean, but I think every convincing piece of architecture is somehow a meditation and a proposal on what are these rules of coexistence, and a proposal and a meditation that is then offered in the form of something you can actually meet by just randomly walking along the street, which is very specific of architecture. If there are rules in architecture, wow, I don't know. I mean, I would tendentially say yes, and I would even dare to say yes, and we should impose them. But actually, I see how armless as a position it is. So yes, there are. Yes, I think there are. We do this thing with these numbers because we think there are. But in society, if I go from the airport of Hanover to here, there's not that much rules, honestly. So let's accept it. Regarding that book, that book is a which I can show you if you want.
Yes.
It's interesting, this format, all the lectures you can do. So this book is actually made because I teach in Vienna, and in Vienna I teach the first semester course, a thing that is called Grundlagen des Entwerfens, and it's made of two parts. One is theory, and the other part is exercise. And the theory is actually to explain to students who are entering architecture faculty for the first time what this discipline is supposed to be. And this thing, in my opinion, comes not from my predecessor, that is Anders Palfi, but from the predecessor, that was Rob Creer and was part of Rob Creer's project of indoctrination of the students of TU Wien. So I inherited this indoctrination format without any doctrine to put into the head of the students. So what I did was, okay, let's try to see what architecture is about by organizing lectures. There are 8 lectures, and they are organized according to couples. Like this one is roof and wall, and through the discussion of these couples, see a bit what are the sort of questions that you can address in architecture. And of course, also it's always these 2 pictures. One refers to roof and one to wall, and of course this was a way to show picture to the student, so that at least they could start with a bit of a visual background, that they could start to process these images for their own formation. And you see the picture's always the same. I mean, I'm very repetitive. And these are, yeah, a little bit like my notes for this thing. And at a certain moment, I had all these notes, and I made this book, and that's it. But there's no real theory. It's just kind of, architecture is about walls, about roofs, it's about memory, but also about shelter, it's about action, it's about language. Actually, it's not about language, I think, but there's people who believe in that, so there are alternatives, and these alternatives are what makes architecture a cultural activity, which is also something that we might discuss, because maybe it's not, or maybe in certain cultural contexts there's no need for architecture. But architecture, as we are teaching in contemporary schools in Europe, and in a way as we are suggested we should teach by the institution who pay our salaries, is still considered a cultural activity. So this is a little bit what I try to show to the students, like what are the possible alternatives, and to see a bit of pictures, so that you at least get an idea of the possibilities. And of course, this raises the issue of, maybe not of rules, but issues of a canon. And of course, the canon I implicitly propose is a very Western canon, because I'm 47-year-old Italian, and I mean, what I know is this. And you see here, just for example, it's only Roman architecture. So that's Temple of Venus in Rome, plan of Temple of Venus in Rome, location of the Temple of Venus in Rome, and then SOM, so New York in the 60s, and proposal by Venturi in 68, Saarinen, that's in Illinois. I mean, it's a very defined set of knowledge. Yeah, and of course, a bit of Arab architecture, but I mean, not so kind of global in a way, my background. So these are certainly not the rules. This is also a reaction to Rob Creer. I didn't want to be forced into Rob Creer's step, and it's also the fact that I made these drawings that are much more stupid than the drawings of Rob Krier. Like, I am deliberately stupid. Deliberately non-didactic in a way. Didactic and non-didactic.
Okay, thank you very much. So I was wondering if there are questions.
By the way, you can buy the book on this thing, Amazon, you know.
I think on your last project, you told us about the reference you had in Niagara Falls, and you were telling that it got demolished.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you know why it got demolished, and what do you do so your building doesn't end up with the same problems or the same fate, basically?
I'm not sure. I say that it got demolished, but I'm not 100% sure. I would say most likely it got demolished. I think it was a shopping mall, like a first generation shopping mall. I believe at the time Pelli was still associated in the office of Victor Gruen, who's an Austrian architect who fundamentally invented shopping malls. And I think these first generation shopping malls who still had an ambition of being somehow a civic, offering civic I don't know, performance didn't work anymore. They were in a way either too small or too in the city center. And I think in US, it also really depends on what happens to the city altogether, because there are cities who collapse from an economical point of view and are fundamentally abandoned. And I guess Niagara Falls could be one of them. I don't know. It's part of the region that heavily de-industrialized starting in the 80s. So I don't know. And what we can do about our building not being demolished? Nothing. If it has to be demolished, I think it will be more and more difficult to think of plainly demolishing building, because it's becoming more and more expensive to simply bring trash to the filling dam. So most likely buildings will be transformed, and I hope it will be. The building is also, well, I didn't explain that, but so the building is done in collaboration with consultants that are called Atmos Lab from London. And this part of the building, these, and all of that is not conditioned. So it's a system of, like, through the effects of radiation, it's capable of accumulating certain amount of heat, so that in winter and also by closing some shutters here, it's possible to obscure and cool down it in summer, so that only this part and this part need to be conditioned. So it's a system that is consumes much less energy that you would think, and tries by doing that to be more sustainable for the future. It's also a very robust building, so demolishing would be complicated. Not impossible.
What interested me was that when you're when you were speaking about the Hall of Memory, that one of your main inspirations were situated in Egypt. I was intrigued because I maybe I didn't understand it correctly, but for me, most of the forms came out of the public space surrounding the project, or how to improve the space surrounding the city and in the city. And is there a limit on, basically, is there like a region you draw where you take inspiration from, or is it basically like if you want to create a space for memory for the people of Milan, we take inspiration from broader subjects? It's a bit more of a...
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, well, I don't know how you refer to things. I don't think there's a geographical limit. I think you can learn from things that are very far away, and in a way it happened. At the same time, I think we remain pretty contextual in Milan. There's a tradition of brick building. The building nearby is in bricks, so it's very nuanced, but again, I can imagine also much bolder references to things much more far away, and provided it looks nice in the end, it's okay. I think it's something that you judge by the final product, and in this specific case, I cannot judge. But it's not me who should judge if it's successful or not. But yeah, I think you can have a very wide background of images. Yeah.
Okay, I've been waiting to ask this question a long time in anticipation for your visit and your great lecture. Thank you. Today we read some more texts and outputs by BAUKUH. Among these was a list of 17 theses on architecture, and some of those theses were bewildering, some were on second thought very comprehensive, but one I cannot explain to myself, and that is when you say there are no types.
There are no types. Where did you read it? No, I think we might have written, like, I fundamentally agree, there are no types, in the sense that, for instance, we've been doing a library. This is an archive, fundamentally. And the other one, the other big project at the end of the presentation, is a library. Now, how can you decide what is a library and what is an archive? Fundamentally, a library is an archive where a lot of people go, and the archive is a library where nobody goes. And it's not really crystal clear where the archive stops and the library begins, and that is a bit the meaning. There are no types. There are no types in the, let's say, hardcore understanding of the thing, what would be the Giorgio Grassi understanding of, this is a Roman theater and you should do it like that. There's only that way. It's not true. Well, actually, for the Roman theater, for certain specific reason, maybe. But except of the Roman theater, which is really an equation on the propagation of voice in a closed environment and a certain steepness. Well, okay. But what's opera theater and what's prose theater? What's also it becomes very difficult to
It was in notes on contextual.
yeah. No, notes on contextual architecture.
Yes.
Yeah, and as written, there are no types. Okay. Yeah, it's true.
So you say that the types, if we use the term, it's more like a cliche.
No, not in that sense. But it's just a tool that you cannot trust too much. Like, okay, we can talk of archives and libraries, and we roughly understand that we are talking about two different things. But then, if we really want to know where one stops and the other begins, okay.
Yes. So without types, we can always start from zero and get to a good solution.
No. No, there are types. No. No, we don't start from scratch. There are a thing that I would call precedents. So cases, but the type is somehow a category that brings together different precedents. And the type as such a category is, to me, a sometimes misleading tool, because it's not really clear what it does, and we might over-evaluate it. While on the contrary, the different precedents, like case by case, one by one, this library in this city built in that moment, this other thing, they are useful also because they don't try to become sort of ideal entity. Okay. So my position in the terms of the Middle Age philosophical discussion on the universals that is similar is nominalistic. So the types are flatus vocis, which means like a word, just a word. So they might be helpful, but they are not an entity in themselves. They do not exist separated from the different incarnations. So there are no types.
First of all, thank you for your inspiring lecture. I was wondering, or I have a question about let's call it joint intellectual framework BAUKUH works within. Your website states that you and your 5 partners, if I'm not mistaken, work within like reason and a sense of rationalism. Can you give us an insight into the, let's call it friction that may arise, like the discussions that may arise within this framework, or are you always on the same intellectual page?
No, of course we disagree. And how to say, in the everyday, more or less, everybody has his own things to do because there's certain organization. But imagine we have a new commission or we do a new competition. We try to have a discussion in between all the partners, if we manage. And this discussion is a free and open discussion in which all the different knowledge of the different partners is brought to the project, which is the thing on which we all think we can equally contribute, because maybe if it's about, I don't know, writing, certain people can do better than others, and that's kind of a accepted thing. But actually, architecture is like the creative part of architecture is something that we think we can share. And we have a simple discussion, which we normally start from thinking about the things that are there in the context, in reading the context, which is something you can talk about. And then someone proposes, I don't know, let's do a triangular building or a squarish building, and yeah, we might discuss yes, no, the problems. There's too little parking places because they want underground parking places, or cost too much, or whatever. And then we enter into discussion. Yeah, you know, maybe this corner can be done like that, of building by Leverent. Or no, actually, if we do it round, it can be like that, building by Sizza, and that's the type of discussion. Then either we agree, or someone has to leave because he has a meeting, or goes to take kids at the kindergarten, and things somehow develop. And there's also sort of tradition in the office in which 20 years ago we did this thing like that, maybe we can do it again, or at least the method in which we can do that type of drawings or that type of drawings. Yeah. Okay. That there's no method to actually do projects. Like you do a project, you discuss with the other people in the room, and then slowly the thing goes on, and a lot of time we just fight, and that's it. It's very simple.
Another short question. What's behind the name BAUKUH?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Really, zero. Sounds like fake German. It is fake German. Next question.
I have a bit of a more abstract question again. During the presentation, you mentioned that I don't know if I phrase that correctly now in your words, that monumentalism is like a bit scalable.
Mm-hmm.
And what I then saw when you were talking about the library is that many parts were slightly different from like the typical perfectly scalable object. So, for example, what I don't know if that was really intentional or just overlooked into that, was that during the escalators that they weren't really perfectly straight, but a bit more slanted to the side. I don't know if if that's just the drawing, or if that's really meant to be.
They are not
Perfectly straight.
They are not perpendicular. They're slightly. Yeah.
So is there like a form or some part of a monument that cannot be scaled, or that has like only a certain, that can only be like experienced from a certain distance? Because like again, during the Hall of Memory, you were talking about the physical closeness to the let me look at my notes.
Yeah,
the physical connection to the memory because of the stairs, but on the outside.
No, here
there was,
it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very simple. Here there are an archive of documents. These documents are quite precious because they're important for Italian history. So there are some letters of partisan fighters from the 40s, and it cannot be touched. But it's also things that are precious, but they're not very spectacular because you put them in a folder and they look like your tax documents. And so what we wanted to do is that by walking on these stairs, that doesn't bring you there. You cannot get there with the stair, you just pass in front of it and you get to, I don't know, 80 centimeters. So you cannot really touch, but you almost have the feeling you can touch it. And that was what I wanted to do.
Okay, so I was thinking about like that was something of an inverted monumentalism, but you're getting closer to the detail, not from the outside.
No,
but
there's
from the inside.
nothing of this sort of concepts in what we're doing. It's
interesting.
very down to the earth, and there might be some complications about Aldo Rossi, but once it's about buildings, it's very, very pragmatic. It's about the experience of walking into the building, what you see, how big things are. There's no metaphors, no things like that.
Okay, thank you.
That's enough. So, okay.
Okay.
I would say that's it. Thank you very much. It was very nice that you could find time and